And thanks for being with Morning Live. Now, there's a lot of expectation that Finance Minister Tito Mboweni will prioritise economic growth when he tables his budget speech tomorrow. The economy, as we all know, was already fragile before it took an even bigger knock last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns. And some businesses obviously had to close, millions of people lost their jobs, and the country's unemployment rate is at an all-time high. But what are Labour's expectations from tomorrow's budget speech? To tell us more from what Fedusa expects, we're joined by Ashley Benjamin, the Deputy General Secretary of the Federation of Unions of South Africa, or Fedusa. Ashley, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers out there. Thank you for having us on your show.
Absolute pleasure, even though the subject is a bit grim. So we look at the unemployment rate and it is sitting at 30.8% officially. But of course, you believe as Fedusa that the retrenchments have pushed that figure beyond 50%. So speak to us about your assertions and what makes you say this.
Thank you, Sakina. I think it's a widely known fact that the impact of COVID-19 has caused severe harm to our economy. In excess of 2 million South Africans lost their jobs, others lost income, reduced working hours, closures of businesses. And that has had a devastating impact and further impacted on the increase of the current already high unemployment rate in our country.
So from tomorrow's budget speech, obviously there will be a great emphasis on how to resuscitate this economy. What are your expectations, and do you have any suggestions that you would perhaps think the minister should heed?
Yes, thank you. First of all, we would like government to fast-track the economic recovery and the reconstruction plan. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, we just need to implement the already good policies that's in place. So from Fedusa's side, we are fully behind government's efforts to roll out that economic infrastructure plan, which has many huge infrastructure projects in place, which has the ability to create a lot of jobs and economic development.
Which are those infrastructure plans? And you say they are good plans. Which exactly are those, and why haven't they borne any fruit to date?
Well, as you would know, that there's about 156 of those plans, infrastructure plans in place. The social partners at NEDLAC with government has been engaged in talks how to roll out. So I think there was a little bit of delay by negotiating with social partners, but we believe that we are now ready to roll out those infrastructure projects, and government need to finance those projects that we can, turn around the economy and create much needed jobs that we needed. In the same breath, we are also appreciative of government's efforts, during the COVID-19 pandemic by implementing the UIF TERS and the 350 Rand relief scheme for poor and the marginalized South Africans. However, we would have liked to see a more permanent conversion of that 350 Rand relief scheme to the poor and marginalized South Africans.
Okay, let's just park the 350 aside for a moment. We'll come back to it. And let's talk specifics, Ashley, when you talk about revitalizing this economy. In terms of industries, you take tourism, the hospitality industry, for example, the arts, which is usually seen as low-hanging fruit. They've been all but decimated by this pandemic and the lockdown. So how do you expect the government to resuscitate these and also, other sectors? How exactly are we meant to go about this?
Thank you, Sakina. I fully agree with you. In particular, the tourism industry and hotels industry has been severely decimated by the impact of COVID-19. So what we're saying is that there's been interventions through master plans which developed by government, and that exactly deals with these crises that was created by the negative impact of COVID-19. We need that much needed jobs to stimulate the tourism industry by investing in funding those businesses, in particular small businesses like B&Bs and those type of projects. The master plans, we believe, is the ideal intervention to ensure that we can recover and revive those industries. Also, the jobs fund needs to come and urgently the much needed economic boost in those sectors so that workers' jobs can again be revived and protected.
And speaking to this, the relief that was meant to come online for some of these SMMEs, you as Fedusa, you've expressed concern that the SMMEs and the loan guarantee scheme that was meant to assist them, is perhaps not going as well as planned. So how would you assess that?
Thank you, Sakina. We are still very unhappy about the loan guarantee scheme. It's a fact that many businesses, the scheme was intended to provide relief and rescue packages for already struggling businesses. But we see because of the rigidness and all the red tape involved, it's impossible for businesses to apply for this funding in order to take them, out of the doldrums and the negative impact. So we call on government to relax this red tape and all the conditions and to ensure that we can create a much needed job. It's not going to help us to have money available, but other red tape makes it impossible for businesses, in particular small businesses, to access those much needed funds.
But what were your deliberations at NEDLEC level with regard to this? Because it's one thing coming on national television and decrying the situation for what it is, when you actually have an opportunity to engage on these matters, one would think.
Well, Sakina, we engage robustly within the social dialogue space, in particular NEDLEC, and many of these issues have been addressed, and we are hopeful that we will see a change in attitude and the relief that's much needed to industry to create and protect jobs will now be forthcoming.
But what does that mean in real terms, Ashley? Because you've just expressed concern about things like the loan guarantee scheme. And then now you say in practically the same breath that you expect to see some relief. So which is it? And on what are you basing this expectation that you have? And should people who are watching, owners of small, medium enterprises, should they, take your word that things are indeed going to get better from here on in?
For sure. From our side, from Fedusa side, we will certainly monitor and apply all pressure on government and other institutions like financial institutions to ensure that what is intended actually happens so that we can boost the economy and create and protect the much needed jobs. That's the guarantee from our side. We will certainly follow this up, Sakina.
But what are you basing that guarantee on, Ashley? What sort of power, what sort of, pressure can you literally bring to bear on financial institutions, for example? Let's get real.
Yeah. Well, Sakina, there's various ways that one can deal with the matter. The first, foremost, is social dialogue. I mean, South Africa's got a proud history of social dialogue, in particular NEDLEC. But there's various other ways and other forums that one can deal. The banking councils, all of those institutions can be engaged, And if not, then one can consider other measures to ensure that those institutions come to the party and support the much needed struggling businesses.
But aren't these just platitudes, Ashley? Because why haven't you been able to bring pressure to bear on these institutions to date? We've already almost reached the 1 year mark of this pandemic and the lockdown situation, and businesses are closing, businesses are going under, people have lost jobs by the millions. What's going to change now?
Well, Sakina, you'll appreciate that almost the entire part of 2020, was a devastating year for South Africa. Not much could have been done apart from social dialogue that has actually taken place in order to address the same issues that we are now talking about. So, and now that we have assessed the outcome of that, and we agree that not that all is rosy, there's a lot of things that's not satisfactory, that can achieve our objectives like jobs and economic development. So now it's time to act. We acknowledge that there's been some difficulties in the past within our economy, with the way government has functioned. But we're saying, as social partners, we must support government, but we must also be firm when we see that government is not acting on its promises.
How firm have you been? Give us an example.
Well, as I said to you, in terms of, we were limited during the COVID period. As you would know, we would have loved to pursue other avenues, but as you know, we've been very much restricted to measures like, social dialogue in that. So I don't want to reveal too much, but safe to say that we are acknowledging some of the constraints, some of the challenges that we have, our economy is facing, and as a social partner, Fedusa is fully prepared and ready to engage and ensure that we achieve our objectives.
Let's talk about that 350 Rand social relief of distress grant, and you saying you would have liked to see that particular program extended even further. Why?
Well, I mean, it's no doubt that the levels of inequality and poverty in South Africa, it's devastating. We need the poor and the marginalized need a basic income grant to sustain them, just to barely make ends meet. So we believe that if the financial resources is available, that should happen. Similarly, we're expecting government to make pronouncements on the wealth tax that has been mooted for some time. We believe that can contribute to the already high levels of inequality and poverty in our country.
Let's separate those two issues very quickly. The basic income grant. What is Fedusa's view? What is your vision on what a basic income grant should look like in South Africa?
Well, it's difficult at this stage to quantify it in view of the current economic climate that the country finds itself in. But I think we are all in principle in agreement that there's a dire need for a basic income grant to support the poor, unemployed, and marginalized South Africans. Equality is not good for any country, for any society.
Inequality, I think you mean. But just as we wrap this, Ashley, experts calling for the wage bill to be cut, you as Fedusa and Labour more extensively demanding bargaining and, of course, the implementation of collective agreements in the public service. Do you expect that the minister will address some of these demands that the unions have put on the table?
Thank you, Sakina. I mean, it is totally unacceptable, the government's attack on collective bargaining, in particular the public sector wage bill, the Resolution 1 of 2018. And we call on the minister to make a budgetary allocation tomorrow in his budget speech towards assisting struggling public sector workers, further to allow budgetary allocations to professionalize the public service and the rollout of the NHI. We call on government to return to the bargaining table because we believe there is wisdom in coming back to the table and discussing these issues with public servants.
Well, Ashley Benjamin, let's leave it there. Ashley Benjamin is from Fedusa talking to us about the trade union's expectations of Finance Minister Tito Mboweni's budget speech tomorrow. And no doubt we'll hear a lot more about that today. And of course, tomorrow being D-Day, there'll be a lot of talk still around this. Let's take a quick break before we bring you your 7 o'clock news.
Thank you.